podcast.
Yes, welcome.
What are you sipping on?
We've got wine.
Wine?
We figured let's go the other way with this. You know, not manly. No, I don't know. Is it socially acceptable as a full-grown man to drink wine? I think it is.
Only if you put it between your two fingers like this.
Like this.
Yes.
Let's taste it together.
I'm drinking scotch. Scotch.
That's a man's drink.
No. See, you know what? Nobody really likes scotch.
Are you kidding me?
Oh, I mean, nobody really likes scotch.
You've seen me drink scotch.
Listen, I've drank scotch, lots of scotch, but it doesn't mean I like it, or doesn't mean you like it. I think people just do it because it's what you're supposed to do.
Is it on the rocks?
It's on a Death Star rock. One Death Star ice cube.
So what does ice actually add to a drink? That's the only thing I never understood.
Water.
Okay. Right. Well,
it waters it down.
My dad's a gin on the rocks guy.
Okay.
I just don't see. I tried it, but I don't see what the ice actually adds to the drink.
Well, it waters it down over time.
It's not supposed to, but see, that's the whole concept of having the actual large ice cube, because you're supposed to drop the ice cube into the glass from such a height that it does not shatter the ice, because if it's too small, it will melt and water the drink down quickly. So one large cube like that will stay like that longer, and it will not water your drink down.
And they also make whiskey stones. They're just little, ceramic cubes that you freeze, and then they don't water down your drink. They just keep your drink cold, so...
Wow.
Sitting next to me is Steve. Say your last name.
Liederbach.
Steve Liederbach. He's a movie guy, and he's on the podcast today, drinking wine with me at my home.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, man. Thanks for coming out. Cheers.
Cheers.
Later, we're gonna
Can I get a virtual cheers?
There you
Cheers.
go. Yeah.
For these guys.
Nobody caught that. You will on the podcast later, though. Anyway, so but Steve's a film producer. He is a movie maker, a video connoisseur, so to speak, and he kind of is a local critic of all things theatrical, motion picture related.
Yeah. Well, critic implies that I'm criticizing, right? But I'm not really criticizing.
But that's kind of like judgment. People have a negative connotation to the word judgment, but judgment can be good.
That's true.
So can you criticize in a positive way?
Absolutely.
There's constructive criticism.
But we put constructive on it to change the criticism. It's changing it. Does that mean that criticism in itself is negative and you have to put constructive on it to make it good?
Maybe it's because, like you said, it's just automatically a negative connotation. So, yeah, you put constructive to remind people that this is the opposite of negative.
Go on. Like you can see, we're running a real professional operation here.
I'm a film guy. I'm not a philosopher.
I don't philosophize often. So this is going to be another one of those that we drink and see what happens, folks. Anyway. So, Drazi, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm Creeth, by the way. As you know me, but that's Drazi. Okay, so I just met Steve earlier.
Was taking a drive. My car got stuck in the snow outside.
I asked him if he wanted to make a quick 50.
Yeah.
What was that? What is it? I'm not gay, but $20 is $20.
$20 is $20. I want that shirt so bad. Anyway, so
before we get started, as you'll see up here, it's not going to work for you guys because you can't see it. I'm rocking the new logo for Players versus Podcasts. It does sync up with the new Pod Bros logo right there, I believe.
Are we below it or above it?
You are next to it.
There's probably
So
some
to
below
your
us that were above us.
below us is the branding, which is to my left. So
Okay,
to your
sorry.
right, yeah. New logo, rocking it. What do you guys think? Let us know. We did away with the skull, and we went completely something that I designed myself here, and I like it.
We like it too. We support your life decisions.
So Steve, you do video, and you do a podcast as well, right?
That's right. Rusted Film Report is the name of my podcast. I started it about a year ago, and it's mostly filmmakers who do a lot of it's a lot of independent filmmakers.
Okay.
But it's kind of an educational deal, and I get to chat with some professional filmmakers to teach kind of like the guys like me who are aspiring filmmakers, the ropes, and then they get to talk about their projects as well. And we have a good time, sort of like this. This is the first time I'm on the opposite end of the table because
being interviewed.
Yeah, I'm usually the one doing the interviews.
It's a little weird just staring at somebody's eyes this close. I mean, I know we're supposed to be talking about important things, and we're going to get to that and a lot about it, but it's kind of weird doing this.
This isn't the first interview that we've done in this format, though.
It's not, but I feel like I'm a lot closer than I usually am, and Steve's a lot better looking than most of the guests, so I don't know.
It's my hair.
It is the hair. It's the hair.
I'm texting Rick that your current interviewer is better looking than he is. That's Rick Sands.
Rick Sands does our music, folks. Make sure you go find him. He's really
Listen
good.
to that podcast.
He's got good hair too. Anyway, so how long have you been doing the podcast stuff for?
The podcast has been going on, I think, for about a year now. I started it probably last year, maybe right around the same time.
Okay.
Close to the Cleveland Film Festival, which is coming up in a couple months.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know. I just been wanting to do something for a while. I did radio in college, and I kind of, I had an urge to like want to keep doing, radio, but I didn't have an idea. Like I just didn't want to do something without having like a solid idea, you know. And then since naturally being into film, I kind of just like it started making sense that the angle being that I'm not a film professional, but I want to be, and I know that film is big in Cleveland right now.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
So,
now, is that a podcast that you run by yourself? I mean, do you host it yourself, edit it yourself? It's just a solo show?
The podcast is up on iTunes. You can find it on iTunes if you search for Rusted Film Report, and we also post it on sparksradio.com, which is another podcast media website with a couple other podcasts up there as well. But yeah, no,
we'll have the links to all that stuff too on the Facebook page and Twitter. So remember,
very cool.
at Jack-Wagon Media and Facebook.com/Jack-Wagon Media, or search for it on YouTube, and we'll have all the links to Steve's stuff. So
with hosting a podcast by yourself like that, do you find that it's difficult to motivate yourself to put out a show consistently? I mean, do you have a schedule that you put it out? Do you do like a once a week show, once a month?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Yeah, when I first started, I think I was definitely maybe a little bit over ambitious, because what I wanted originally was to do like a very weekly format like you guys are doing now. But what I do find is that when you're trying to like nail down interviews all the time, especially starting out, people in film, they're busy. So a lot of times what I find is like every week I'm emailing like tons of people. Maybe I get a response back from like 3 people, and one says, yeah, definitely I'll do it. And then their schedule gets hectic and I never hear from them, or it could just be like weeks later I get the interview, and sometimes they just drop off the face of the earth and you just don't hear from them. So like definitely getting those interviews, you have to be motivated because you have to keep going at it. It's like applying for a job, you have to be on it every single day. Yeah, so it kind of morphed into more of like every other week or bi-monthly sort of thing. But the cool thing is I've been expanding into doing a lot of video interviews as well. Yeah. So I got a couple different like video mini documentaries up.
That's going to lead into my next question is, Drazi and I are huge fans of Kevin Smith, and was one of the definitely motivated us through Smodcast and some of the other stuff, some of the other podcasters, to get a little more creative and to just, to take this wherever we can, just because it's fun and you never know what happens with it. But his recent movie that came out, Tusk, you got a really good video interview, didn't you, recently?
Yeah, and that one.
Tell us about that.
That one came together just like so perfectly because the guy who designed the walrus suit, Robert Kurtzman, owns a special effects shop right here in Ohio, in southern Ohio. And I had been wanting to get down there and do this since I started the podcast, because I knew the guy was right out here. ended up getting in touch with his personal assistant, who I just found out, was like, she was the mother of like this girl I went to school with.
Oh, right on.
So, I just kind of worked my way in. She was more than happy to like get me down there. And yeah, he was a real awesome guy. He took me on a tour of the workshop. We sat down, talked about his career and like all the cool things that he was doing. And to your point, I mean, it was just like, I was blown away, because you walk through the front door and the lobby's right here, right? And there's like these big double doors that go into the conference room. In the corner of the conference room is like this like brick platform. Sitting right there is the suit. that walrus
awesome.
suit. Like you and I are sitting here like this. Like I was across from Kurtzman. Behind Kurtzman in the corner was that walrus suit. So the whole time I was doing the interview, like it's just like sitting right there behind me.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was incredible. And like the heads were up on the wall, but unfortunately I couldn't get any shots of that because the movie had just come out.
Right.
So
Yeah, you got an interview with him like the day, wasn't it that Friday? The day
it was like the week after.
Yeah, it was right there.
Yeah, and he definitely had a lot of interesting things to say about that. Justin Long, who plays, the main character, the podcaster, he said, like, in order to get in the suit, Justin Long had to be on his hands and knees the whole time. So he was in this suit, which, I mean, if you look at it up close, I don't know if you guys are claustrophobic, but I'm freaking claustrophobic as hell. And when I look at some of the different things he made, like, I can't imagine being in a suit like that for, like, he was saying, like, a 10-hour day.
Oh, my God.
And he said, I asked him how freaked out he was, and he said he was real good about it. Like, he didn't complain at all, but he had to be in there all freaking day. So you're probably taking your breaks and meals in the suit, Yeah. But,
So, good interview, though, all around.
Oh, yeah, dude. And if you don't know the name Robert Kurtzman, I guarantee you've seen something that he was
done, yeah.
Because he did, like, the early Evil Dead 1 and
With Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, he worked on Evolution. So you remember Robert Reitman, I think? Reitman?
I don't know if I know that movie.
Evolution with the 7-Up guy.
Yeah.
And Jeff Goldblum.
Orlando Jones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Make 7-Up yours. Come on.
I know what you're talking about. I just don't remember the movie. Oh, Evolution. Yeah, where the shampoo kills everything.
Yes.
The Head and Shoulders kills it.
One of the things he talks about is the giant asshole monster. It
Yep.
was like a giant sphincter.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he talked about that.
Yeah,
too. It was like
that came out when I was in college, actually. That's funny.
It was like an 8-foot tall puppet, he said, that they were building. And I asked him what was one of the most ridiculous things he remembers building, or if there was anything that he was like, holy crap, what is this? And he said the sphincter monster was definitely...
That's awesome.
Yeah, but... So he did some of the Night of the Living Dead movies. He's really good friends with who is Freddy Krueger? Roberts.
Patterson.
No.
No. He was in a vampire movie. I don't know who's Robert Patterson.
He was a vampire in the one movie no one wants to admit we know the name of, Twilight.
You know how I know you're gay?
Anyway, moving on.
Next.
Yeah, but he did a lot of those movies. I don't know if you ever saw From Dusk Till Dawn. That was his movie.
Absolutely.
That was the first movie that Tarantino was hired to write a script for, and then he knew Tarantino because they were living in the same town, and so that's kind of, he met Tarantino through a friend who was like, if you're looking for someone to write the script, you ought to check this guy out. And
right on.
that was a really cool story too, because they talked about how like he'd have to drive to get Tarantino. He didn't have a car back then. Tarantino lived with his mom. He was working at, I think, a record store or a video rental store.
Nice.
And so he'd drive out to pick him up at his mother's house and bring him back to like their workshop or whatever, and then they just hang out and talk movies, and they paid him like I think like $1,500 or something, and so like he quit the video store, wrote the script, and went from there.
He wrote the script for $1,500.
I think that's all it was. Yeah.
From dusk till dawn.
Yeah, if you go back and watch my interview, they talk. He gives you the exact price, but yeah,
Nice.
it's like something real cheap. Because Dusk Till Dawn was a very low budget film.
Yeah.
And
Definitely a cult classic though at this point.
oh yeah, absolutely.
So right on then.
But he said like when he got to his house, the most surreal part for someone like us is he said he got to his house, you know, and he brought him upstairs. One of the trade-offs too for the price was also that he would write the script if he did some of the special effects on his movie Reservoir Dogs. So they did like the ear gag. So all of the Kill Bills, like the company that he was working for at the time, like they did all of that, and they still not Kurtzman, but the company that he was working for, like they still do all of Tarantino's special effects today. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I know. It's surreal when you think about it, you know, because you don't really
how close you are to any one person anywhere, like being that famous or not.
Oh yeah,
no, I understand. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and even meeting this dude, I was very kind of. I don't want to say starstruck, but I was nervous, you know, because I mean, I read up on him and I knew about all the stuff that he did, and I mean, you know, whether you're following like special effects or not, I mean, the dude's a legend in the industry, so it was very, very surreal. But he was an awesome guy, and yeah, I mean.
Right on, man.
I don't know what else to say.
No, that's awesome. That's great.
They've got a very distinct style of special effects too. If you think about it, like if you watch from Dusk Till Dawn through like Death Proof and Planet Terror, like it's a very distinct style. Like it's almost like it's over the top special effects. Like they're not going for like ultra realistic, and it works for that style of movie. So that's pretty cool. It's kind of like their signature in a movie.
And that's another thing we talked a lot about too is, you know, the way a lot of movies are today, 90% of what you're seeing is digital, but the best movies are the ones that kind of mix the two.
Yeah.
He's not really a digital effects guy. They have a digital effects studio, but he's solely on like the special effects, makeup, animatronic side. And you know, I think growing up, I was kind of like at the very like beginning of like the divide between digital and animatronic stuff. Right. So there's a lot of stuff that I still remember growing up thinking like I would rather take like an animatronic dinosaur any day, you know. And even before my time, like you take someone like, I don't know if you know the name Ray Harryhausen. He was a legend with claymation.
Okay.
So he did like Jason and the Argonauts.
Oh, okay, yeah,
all
right
that
on.
stuff.
Right.
So when you even think about stuff like that, that was revolutionary at the time. And even looking at an old movie like that, there's something to be said about that art that I think to myself, like if it could be done today and it's executed, you know, properly, then to your point, Draws, it's just like, it's awesome.
Yeah.
It works for what it's going for.
That's awesome.
And story is really what matters these days, because if you can literally prove that there's nothing you can't do with digital effects, now like it's got to be story.
And you've got no excuse because there's no story you can't write at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
So you know it's going to basically weed out the really good from the good and to the mediocre.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
Your Christopher Nolan's from your, I don't know who you don't like, but
I don't know. I don't follow movie directors enough to really know the difference. I know what I like though, and I know what I don't like. So but you know, Draws is definitely probably a little bit better with that, considering the millions of DVDs he's got and the movies that he watches.
Yeah.
Millions.
Millions.
It's like one ever made.
Steve, so have you seen Birdman, the new Kevin?
Yeah.
I can't even think of the name now.
Yeah, that's with Michael Keaton.
Michael Keaton. I watched it recently, and the first watch through I didn't like it. And so I watched it again.
Hold on. Let's stop yourself. I'm stopping you right there. Hold on. That's not what you said. You didn't like it the first walkthrough, and it was, oh, I'm sure you'll like it because you like all sorts of artsy, weird stuff.
You do.
That's what he said to me.
You do. Like, you probably like that new Shia LaBeouf song from Robin Cantor. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, with the... It's a Shia... I love how it's the Shia LaBeouf song. It's the woman who sings.
Yeah.
What's the other
Chandelier
song?
Sia.
Chandeliers.
Yeah.
It's just that little. I don't know. The whole thing's weird with the 12-year-old girl and him and like rubbing on each other. It's weird.
It's artsy and it's right up your alley. So
it's artsy. I like art. I like human performances. I think it's amazing. But just 12-year-old girls and Shia LaBeouf rubbing up against each other.
What? Yeah. What is this?
I will show.
It's
you
a music video for Sia. So write that down. But there's another song. There's actually a song called Shia LaBeouf by Rob Cantor, and it's the weirdest 3 minutes you'll ever sit through. You're just gonna what? Why?
Wow.
But
yeah, I'm not a big Shia LaBeouf fan to begin with.
So with Birdman, it was a story about this big time actor who couldn't do it anymore because he was the big action hero, and then he went to stage performances.
Right.
I mean, have you encountered any people that you work with that go from film to stage?
No, I think at the kind of the level that I'm at and the kind of people that I meet, I think it either goes one way or the other, or you get a lot of people who are trying to combine the two, which is smart. I mean, there's a reason why. If from my opinion, you look at any British actor who's classically trained and you're talking about like a top billed actor. But yeah, usually the scene in Cleveland, I think, is everybody is at a level where they're trying to figure things out on their own. One of the things about the digital age is that equipment is so easily obtainable. And with that, everyone's trying to buy their own equipment and do things themselves, which can be a great mentality, and it could also have the potential to set you back a little, I think, because I think you need the foundation of something like what you're saying with stage performance or some sort of classically trained acting. And Cleveland doesn't really have like a film school here. I went to University of Akron, and I got a lot of broadcasting and TV production training from the communication program there. But when you're talking about like film, the art of film, I don't know of many schools. OU has a program, I think.
Yeah.
Which I've heard for what it is, it's actually very good. But anyone who's around here, a lot of people are learning on their own. So, I don't know that I know many people that are doing both. But a lot of people, what you do find is a lot of people who have the, what we called in school, the one-man band kind of mentality. Going again with, it's like, well, I can buy this, I could buy this, I could buy this, I could be the editor, I can be the videographer,
right.
I can direct, I can write myself, I can, mix the sound, which again, it's just my opinion. You guys may have a different opinion, but sometimes it has potential to be like really great. And other times it can really set you back if you kind of refuse to learn some of the fundamentals, or if you...
I think with the majority of the time, and I think you can speak to this a little, Draws, and myself too, with even the small stuff that we do with our media stuff. I mean, it's so low level production at times, but I mean, we're learning as we go.
Yeah.
First of all, you can tell the people who have the fundamentals down.
Sure.
I've seen a lot of Steve's videos, a lot of things that he's produced, even on a commercial level, and it's really nice high end stuff.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But this idea that I think people get it in their heads that I can just buy all this stuff and I can just be really sweet.
Sure.
But you realize, number one, it's way more work than it's always way more work than you ever think it is. But then you realize it's way more work than I thought it was. Because this guy's got 15 years of experience working with claymation. Now he understands how to digitize things and work in a digital media, in a digital world really, really well.
Sure.
And he's got all of that experience, and I just bought this camera. It's people have this idea that I think that they can just do it all. the people. It's like an NFL coach who thinks he can coach and be the GM at the same time.
Right.
If you can do it, it's it's
Yeah.
awesome. If you can't, it's very evident very quickly you can't.
And a lot of I've had the same conversation with pretty much every filmmaker that I've interviewed. You know, we always talk about this because I'm always interested, you know, and I've spoken to like young filmmakers our age, and I've spoken to older guys, and they all kind of say the same thing, is that, you know, even that aside, like, it's good to learn how to work with a team.
Sure.
Right? I mean, because it's one thing to like be excited about knowing how to do everything yourself, but like when you're on a set, like the reality is you've got a certain amount of time based on a certain amount of investment that you've made to get this project done, you know, from vision to completion.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think that you're going to do all of that yourself, or even a majority of that, you're really kind of fooling yourself.
Sure.
So you need to learn how to trust other people, that they know what they're doing. You know, if you want to be a director, then that's awesome. Like, learn how to direct. Don't like put all the other stuff aside. Learn how to operate a camera. Learn some basic cinematography. If you really love editing, like my background is an editor. I would love to, like, I write on the side, and I would love to be a director someday. But I also love editing. But, you know, I want to focus on the directing aspect of it and the writing. And then, you know, the rest you kind of just, you have to rely on people that you trust to help you do the job. And with equipment, again, like you brought up a good point, a lot of it comes back to is the skills are going to get you further than the equipment, because the equipment really, you need to, it's cool if you have it, but it's a tool.
Yeah.
You know, it's a tool to help you build your craft. And like I spoke to one filmmaker who did a whole documentary in Antarctica. He is a part of a crew who does work in Antarctica, and he's been doing it for years and years of his life. And so he's a photographer, and he built up over like 10 years of like time-lapse footage and put together a documentary. And like the equipment that he's using, like he's not taking like expensive metal like sliders and cranes, right? He's building shit out of like ropes and pulleys.
Yeah.
Because that's one of those situations where like now you're in an environment where it's like the $1,000 piece of equipment is going to freeze. Now we're talking ropes and pulleys. So even if you have the most expensive equipment, you still have to adapt to what you're trying to make, you know?
Right.
And that's the only thing that like you hope that like young people with talents don't lose sight of.
Yeah.
You know? So
that's a really good point. No, it's a really good point.
Yeah. It's interesting that you brought up Birdman, though, because I was going to ask you about that. Earl was saying that you saw it, and if what he's saying is like you didn't really care for it at first, I could definitely see why, because maybe it does have its artsy appeal, but it's definitely one of those movies that I think while you're watching it, you can't really pick apart too much. Like we tend to, when we're watching a really good movie, try and like figure out the depth while we're watching something. I really think it's one of those movies where you kind of have to shut your brain off and take everything in, and then like maybe break it apart afterwards, because I went to see it with my girlfriend, and when we first saw it, I enjoyed it and so did she, but I really didn't like it until afterwards when we started talking about it, you know? Because it definitely, I think, and tell me if you disagree, but I definitely think it has a lot of depth to it.
It does, yeah. Especially with with the way it ended. I don't want to ruin it for...
I haven't seen it yet.
For old Creeth there, but... and like how... Well, I mean, you know that he was an action hero in Birdman. It's supposed to mimic him playing Batman and giving it up.
Right.
And his role as Batman haunts him throughout the whole movie, telling him, you know, you can't do this anymore, give it up, blah blah blah, and it's really cool how it ends. But I guess the reason that I brought it up is because my sister-in-law is the stage manager at Purple Rose Theater in Chelsea, Michigan. It's Jeff Daniels Theater.
Okay, yeah.
And he runs a one-man show out of there. And then there's also, some small cast performances that she's involved with. And I was just wondering if you think that going from being a movie star to going into film like that, is that kind of like the end of the career? Is that you're like, I can't do film anymore, am I going to do this? And I thought about all that with Birdman, and it's really interesting. So yeah,
I think Birdman definitely does a great job of showing you too that people who are involved in any sort of art take what they're doing very seriously, because one of the things in Birdman that's very clear is like, here's this famous actor who was kind of typecast in like this one role. His career in film is, for all intents and purposes, dead, because he gave up, doing any more Birdman films. And then he decides to do, and I can't remember the name of the play, but it's a very like classic, traditional, like staple of classic theater.
Like Hamlet, or
Yeah, it's like Death of a Salesman.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah.
And what you get to see now is the theater buffs. And there's like this Edward Norton, who he casts as like his main guy in the play. Which is also funny, because if you don't know, Edward Norton is a method actor. So like they make fun of Edward Norton is almost making fun of himself, because he's playing like himself as a method actor for theater, and so you kind of see that it's like he takes what he does extremely seriously. It's all leading up to opening night, which is like, this horribly bitchy like critic, this old woman who like writes reviews of all these plays, is basically like, she just like rips stuff apart. So he's got to go up against that too.
Yeah.
And where the other layer of it is that they play off of this idea of love versus adoration, and being admired. And Michael Keaton is kind of this guy, you get the sense, who he can't tell the difference. He's been doing this for so long, he can't tell the difference. You know what, Draws, I kind of forgot what your question was. I started going on about Birdman.
I was just saying, do you think that stage is where the actors go when they feel like their career is kind of done? Because in the case of Jeff Daniels, he's moved away from movies for the most part. He's got a pretty solid career in television now, and he came back and did Dumb and Dumber 2. But it seems like, because he's doing these one-man shows out in Chelsea here, and is that something you've experienced, or you've seen kind of a trend?
Yeah, no, okay. I wouldn't necessarily. I think in some cases, yeah, maybe, but some actors, even, they like the theater, and some of them were well-respected thespians before even getting into film. And actually, one good example is after Harry Potter. Daniel Radcliffe,
yeah.
Before he started doing films again, he went back to the theater, and he did he kind of did a Michael Keaton, like he did a very well-known play that escapes my mind right now. But I don't.
Seems like a lot of actors do it though. It's where like after you make these big movies, you have to. It's almost like they're telling Hollywood, "Hey, I'm not a sellout, man. I got to go back, and I got to go back to Broadway," because it's it's a very different. It seems very different between L.A. or Hollywood and New York City.
Sure.
It's like New York City. This is where the real actors are, and Hollywood is where all the fluff and other bullshit is.
That's what a lot of Birdman is about too.
Oh, okay.
So,
all right. Yeah.
And if you wanna localize it to something that we can relate to, think about Kevin Smith too. I mean, a lot of like what he admits to is saying that, after he basically thought his career was over.
Yeah, he was done. He said, "I'm not making movies anymore. I'm done." Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But he kind of revived, and maybe if anything, Draws, the theater For some people, yeah, I mean, they might go because they're tired of the Hollywood BS. They might go because they're hoping, like Michael Keaton in Birdman, to find a way to revive their career, and it might not go anywhere from there. And other people, they need it to kind of rejuvenate their career. I mean, Kevin Smith found, you know, a place in the podcast world and realized that like his career was far from over. There's people out there who love him, and you know, I gotta be honest, like Kevin Smith films weren't always like something that like I would hold on a level of Forrest Gump, and he'd be the first to tell you, but I love Kevin Smith, and because I love Kevin Smith, I love his films, you know?
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess in a way it helps some people maybe just rejuvenate their career for sure, and others, yeah, I mean, it probably goes and teeters off.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, there's.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's cool how Kevin Smith, how he talked about that he was done, and then just him getting just shitty, just stoned on this podcast and reading the story about this guy.
So good. Have you listened to that podcast?
I don't know.
What is it? Episode 259?
259? I don't know. We have a podcast dedicated to talking about that podcast. So
it's the podcast where he sits down basically, and him and is it Scott
Mosier? Yeah, Scott.
Mosier. Him and Scott Mosier are just getting baked out of their mind on the podcast, and they start reading this British Craigslist advertisement for someone coming to live there, but he's got to dress up as a walrus, and this was a real thing.
Oh yeah, this is the Tusk.
That episode. Have you heard that episode where they come up with the idea?
You know what? I did. Yes, I did, because I distinctly remember.
Halfway through the thing, he's like, "That's it, copyright." Yep. Yes, Modcast, and it's listening to that, it was just like, holy shit, man, this is amazing.
He captured something really unique there too, which I mean, one day, God willing, I would, if I could just get an interview with Kevin Smith one day, I would hang up the podcasting, because I want to thank him, because the one thing that he did for a lot of filmmakers, if they don't realize it, is they documented, probably for the first time, I could be wrong, but in my opinion, for the first time, the creative process in actual work. Because you've heard him talk all the time about how, like, you and I have had this conversation at work before about how, like, people ask him all the time, like, how do you do it? And he says, oh, you just do it. And they go, really? It's that easy? And he says, well, yeah. Like, he shows you, in a documented podcast, like, just like the creative process kind of unfolding. And maybe it's not the first time, but it is definitely something you don't hear a lot of.
Is it the Grand Budapest Hotel, too, where he's going through that little spiel? Is that what it is? I think it's the Grand Budapest Hotel at the beginning of it, where he's doing the opening monologue, and he talks about how people think that, it is.
Yes.
Writers, people think that writers, that their mind is constantly flowing with ideas about what to write, but it couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah.
It's actually just letting people know that you are a writer, and then basically observing, and then those people will come flock to you and give you that stuff, and you just have to be willing to listen.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of, I thought that was a really cool insight into that creative process, because I think we make that, and once again, I can relate it back to what you and I do, Draws, or even what you do with your podcast and everything else. It's almost like we make it more difficult than it needs to be, instead of just saying, I'm going to try this. Let's see what happens with it, and
right. And we're all critics. Like, we're all our own worst critics. Maybe you've heard, I think it's probably a Chinese proverb that goes like, the enemy is often the great of the good. And that's the point being is that
was the deepest thing ever said on this podcast, by the way.
Well, it's a coworker of ours. No one knows who Jim Selecki is, but Selecki is the one who actually told me.
Well,
and it holds true. So.
Well, sure, but he's a pretty good writer, and it seems like he pretty much knows what's up. So we work with writers all day long. So,
but it is. It's true, because I often find, and to talk about an earlier question you asked, Draws, about how, like, is it hard kind of sometimes running more of a one-man show to be motivated, and it really is, because a lot of times, I'm relying on friends like you guys to give me feedback. My girlfriend, like I'm relying on people who are going to be honest with me about things. But other than that, like I'm doing it all on my own.
Right.
So it is really hard when knowing, as most creatives are, they're their own worst critics. It is hard sometimes to like gain momentum to do things because you sit in front of something long enough or you do something for a long enough time and you're not quite getting the results you hope for right at the beginning. It's easy to be like, well, I'm doing crap then,
Right.
or something's got to change.
That's interesting with what we've been running into now, because we do the podcast and we've done like instructional videos on video games, and then we're doing a series now called The Road to Legendary, where we play a game called Hearthstone. And initially we
Steve's
set
a
out.
Hearthstone player.
Okay.
Paladin.
That's what we're currently running. But we set out to make a video every day this month of our journey from 25 up to Legendary, and it seems like with the podcast, with any of the videos that we do, it's like we kind of have to push each other to do it at points, because there'll be like one night where Crete's like, I really don't feel like filming it tonight, or whatever the case, and then there's other nights where like I can't make it, or I don't want to do it tonight, and so we have to push each other, and I feel like that helps, because if it was something that I was doing on my own, it would be a a la carte kind of show. When I feel like putting something out, I'd put it out. And like with the Road to Legendary, I mean, we're not getting a ton of views on it, but we have fun when we're doing it. So I think we had the talk the other day of, this might not be a series that we do again when we're done, because we're not getting any views on it.
Sure.
So.
And to that, what you're saying, the interesting part about that though is you and I, we've done the podcast for how long? 4 or 5 months now?
Something like that, yeah.
We've done the videos and stuff for about a month. And we've got a substantial amount of views, for people who are just starting out. We've got, close to 200 subsubscribers on it.
You guys have some videos that are like up in 10,000 views.
Yeah.
We
that,
do.
yeah.
I guess the thing is though is, we were talking to one of our close friends the other day, and he literally went into like a 10-minute conversation about how he looks forward to listening and watching it at work throughout the week, because it breaks up his day. It makes it, he gets to see and hear his friends, and it just and it was almost like I almost teared up. Like it was like I turned around and looked at him because I was at his house. I said, we're never missing a day again. We're not, because it was like, this is one of our best friends, and if we're literally doing this only for him, fine, I'll do it. I'll do it every day for him. No problem. And it was just, you didn't realize you were affecting somebody, and I'm not saying that, he would fall off the face of the earth if we didn't do it, but how much he appreciated it and was like, whoa, man, that was deep. Okay, well,
no, absolutely.
I'll do this, no problem.
And when you get that feedback, it's like it's everything that you've been doing, doesn't matter how long, or like you're saying, for how many people, it definitely becomes completely worth it. And it's like those little things, and especially with YouTube's a very tricky beast, and I'll get back to that in a sec, but just to give you an example, there's little things that even like a year later now, like you'd think I'd know a lot more about what I'm doing, but the truth is, like, I'm constantly tweaking and learning new things all the time. One example, I was on a particular day, I was having a conversation with my girlfriend, and I was saying, some of the other podcasts on our website, it's like, it looks like, oh man, like they're getting like, X amount of listens all the time, X amount of downloads, like. And I'm getting I'm doing well too, but like, they're getting like crowd participation feedback. Like I see people are rating their things, and I'm like, this is really cool. Like I'm wondering what I have to do to get the kind of response that they're getting. And I feel so stupid after having this conversation, because my girlfriend looks at me and she goes, have you thought about asking people to like and comment and subscribe? And I just thought, like, holy crap, like, well, no, I didn't, and I thought, well, I don't want to be, I think I said something really idiotic too, like, well, I don't want to be like one of those guys. And she's like, what guy?
What guy? Yeah.
What guy? Everyone does that. It's okay to ask the people that, might be out there listening and appreciating your show to give you something in return.
Sure.
Everyone does it.
Especially if they like it. Hey, because you're saying, if you like it, please go ahead and leave a comment or rate it, you know? So
Absolutely.
that's funny. Him and I, because the whole idea of Road to Legendary was supposed to be an audience participation thing to have them help us get to Legendary, because you played. It's a hard game to get there. I mean, he's got to rank 8 this season, which is unbelievable.
Very nice, yeah.
I've got to, I think, 15, almost to 14.
Yeah.
And our whole thing was, hey, all you guys out there, give us your comments. If you help us get there, we'll promote you and your brand. We'll bring you on the podcast and interview you and everything like that. And have we gotten one comment on any of them?
No, not a single comment. I mean, it's 25 days into the month, and we've
recorded
14.
28 videos.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so it's like, but
and I know people are watching them, because I see the analytics, I see the numbers on it. We're not getting nearly the numbers we get on like our instructional videos, which are through the roof.
Well, yeah. No, I'm sorry. Keep going.
No, and it's finding relevant content, and it's a conversation that Creeth and I have nightly, and it's almost like I don't want to hear it anymore. Is we need to find relevant content, and we need to get it faster than the other guys, and we need to get it out there better looking than the other guys. So I don't know. I mean,
but that's not a weird thing, though. I mean, like,
no,
you
not
work
at all.
for a huge international publication, and that's the constant conversation they have on a daily basis. How are we going to get content? How are we going to get content? You know, I'm sorry, I totally interrupted you.
No, you're absolutely right. It's an argument that we always have. You know, what's new? What do people care about now? How do we find an interesting way to present it? Because I mean, there's tons of people out there doing Hearthstone videos that are better than us, that are more entertaining than us.
Sure. And that's exactly how I started too. I'm sorry.
No, there's a little delay between it. I think because the first set of videos we put up were the instructional videos on how to play in World of Warcraft, and they got such a huge positive response. I think we're at like 15 or 16,000 views on one of those videos now, that we figure that we couldn't miss. Like, we're just, all right, we're going to do this now, and it's going to be great. But like, our Hearthstone videos are getting like 30, 40 views maybe. So have you run into, I mean, is that something that you think about when setting up an interview or making a video or a podcast, that it needs to be current, it needs to be relevant, or or do you focus more on just entertainment, doesn't matter if it's past or
kind of like you're saying, I mean, it's a balance of both, and absolutely, because I'll tell you, you know, my podcast has only been about a year old, and I've been wanting to do a podcast since like right out of college. I graduated like 4 years ago, or 5 maybe now, 2010.
Yeah.
So, but my biggest struggle was exactly what you guys are talking about every day, and that I still ask myself and try to, you know, make sure I'm in my place for this, is that, you know, I didn't want to start something until I knew what I thought people would like to see. And, you know, my other thing, again, going back to like the criticism part of every artist, is like, you know, how do I make it so that I'm just like not like any other guy talking about it, you know? And it wasn't until I kind of found this angle of like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, I'm nobody important. Like but I am.
We like you.
I'm okay. All right. Well, and I appreciate that. There you go. But I thought, you know, I am, however, if I'm nobody important in my mind, I am a wannabe filmmaker, and there's a lot of wannabe filmmakers out there. And there's a lot of filmmakers who are already there that I thought, I'm sure if I worked really hard, like I could get people to talk to me about it, you know? And that's kind of where I took my angle. So yeah, I am constantly thinking about like, you know, how can I make sure it's relevant? How can I make sure that like people trust me, you know, and my opinion and my the content that I'm bringing them. And then the entertainment aspect of it obviously is also very important, and that's something that I've been learning as I go. I mean, I could tell you the first interview that I did at our work, actually, because the first guy I interviewed...
Don't give out names.
No.
All right.
No, the first guy that I interviewed was a filmmaker from Australia.
Okay.
and the time difference was so like it's like a 15-hour time difference, So like he's getting ready for bed. I had to get
which is impossible, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
15-hour time difference.
What if he's recording from space?
Yeah, well, that would have to be it.
Well, is it 15? Because when I was stationed overseas,
12 hours behind somebody.
No, when I was stationed in like Iraq and Kuwait and stuff, it was 13 hours.
Here, I'll tell you.
Okay, maybe 13, but it can't be.
All right, well, I'm going to tell you right now, I probably have it on my clock. That's the other thing. My iPhone has like so many different time zones now. Okay,
Sydney?
So the closest I could get is Sydney. Okay, so it's 2 p.m. It's 16 hours ahead right now.
Is it?
In Sydney, Australia.
They're in the future.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said too. It's futuristic.
This is what happens when I drink on the podcast. I go half stupid, and I'm the math guy. Anyway, okay, so I've ruined it. Go ahead, go.
No, that's all right. But so I was so like incredibly nervous, and like it just like I listened back to it later. And like I was so critical about it, and I'm like, this isn't entertaining at all. Like I sound like Chris Farley from that Saturday Night Live, where he's interviewing people and he's just got this.
So
that was a hoax, right? Yeah. Like because I was like, so you're working on another short film now, right? Well, yeah. Well, how's that going? Like it was bad, right? So I re-recorded all of my audio, like. Over the course of a weekend, I sat there and I played the tape and like listened to what I asked him, and I re-recorded it into a more like entertaining version of myself. And that's what I dealt with on my first interview.
Just a side note, hold on. Have you ever watched Weird Al does that? He takes famous interviews with people.
Yes.
Like with Avril Lavigne, with Eminem, like famous interviews, and cuts out whoever the interviewer is. Yep. And puts his own questions in there, and then just over the stock footage, it's hysterical.
Oh, I love it. My girlfriend loves Weird Al. He came to Akron one year, and she's like, "We got to go." I'm like, "All right."
Nice.
So we went to a Weird Al show.
Nice, very nice.
But and it was kind of like that. But and then I always had like pages, like the day before my interview, I'd go online and I'd reread everything that I thought I knew, and I would write stuff down, and I'd have like 2-3 pages of just like notes and questions in front of me. And I went through all kinds of mistakes just in the first like 3 or 4 interviews that I did, but like now, not that much time later too, right? Because I think I've just finished my 11th or 12th episode in a year.
Yeah.
But I can do it with a page of questions, but it's over here, on the corner of the table, and like it's there for reference. And so, I mean, I've kind of become more entertaining just through experience,
Nice.
Jimmy Fallon mentioned that the other night on the Jimmy Fallon show. I forget who he was talking to, and he's like, he was doing it's riding in cars with celebrities going to get coffee with Seinfeld, and Jimmy Fallon was in there, and he was talking about. He said, when I started doing the Tonight Show, he's like, I had like 2 or 3 questions for people, and then I waited for like them to kind of keep the interview going, and it was horrible. Mm-hmm. And then, now he's, he throws the little gimmicks in there, and, he can talk to somebody for an hour and just keep it entertaining. And that just comes with experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm learning that too, and I'm sure as you guys are learning as well, because even running a podcast, and you two aren't interviewing each other, but the back and forth thing, you
really
have
are every day.
Yeah, exactly. And like I've kind of learned now, like when I can interject, like when is the next appropriate question, or a lot of times my notes, I have notes, but like as they're talking now, I can multitask, and if they say something, I can just jot it down on the piece of paper so I don't forget it. But by the time they're finished with their thought, I know exactly what to transition to next. Yeah. And I don't know if you guys, it sounds kind of superficial at first, but a lot of times when I finish a podcast and I post it within a couple days, I listen to it on the drive, like as I do with all of my podcasts.
Yeah,
I listen to it like a listener, and I pick it apart because I get a chance to hear myself and compare it to the podcasts that I like and think to myself, oh, this is what I did right, this is what I did wrong. And even with content, because I'm finding now too that I'm get a lot better response and feedback and interest when I speak with documentary filmmakers, because I also find that while the podcast originally started more as like a podcast about filmmakers for filmmakers, I find that like when I make one of my friends listen to it, or like when my girlfriend gives me feedback or something like that, they're far more interested and have far more things to say about the documentary filmmakers, because I spend a larger chunk of time talking about whatever their subject or ethical point is, and we just, it ends up being less of a technical conversation. The technical aspect is there for the filmmakers,
Sure,
but much more about the subject. And so like I've been kind of molding it as I go, and I have a lot of different angles that I can take it now. And it's still at that point where it's a question of like, where do I go?
Right.
So there's two things. I mean, I know we're kind of getting close to our time mark.
Yeah,
here,
we're gonna wrap it up.
But two things is, have you ever listened to the Nerdist podcast with Chris Hardwick?
Yes, yeah.
So something I noticed with him is everybody that he brings on, he always brings them on relevant to something that they're doing, some kind of movie or whatever. And so, he'll let them plug whatever it is, but then the rest of the interview is not at all about what they've done. So like he had William Shatner on there, and it's one of my favorite interviews he's done. Is he doesn't sit there and talk about, Star Trek, because that's what Shatner's known for. Like he lets Shatner go off on his tangent about philosophy and all this other nonsense that Shatner's into, and it turns into just a great interview. And he mentions later in another podcast, he goes, when you're starstruck by somebody can kind of tell. And he feels dumb approaching them about what, they're known for. So he started approaching them just as a person. Just tell me about your day. Tell me what happened, 20 years ago. Like, what do you think about this? And then it turns into
Tom
these
Hanks
great
episode's a great example of that too.
Exactly. Yeah, he doesn't hanker him on any of his movies. Like, it just turns into a conversation. And those are some of the most entertaining podcasts I've ever listened to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, secondly, is something that I have a good friend up here in Detroit who is an amateur filmmaker. He's done a couple horror movies. And he told me once, as he's getting into movie making, that horror is where you start. Is that something that you've noticed?
Yeah, well, I would definitely say, to answer that one, horror is a very popular genre out here in Cleveland, and even, with some of the low budget Hollywood films, they're coming out here to shoot horror stuff. And I haven't quite figured out yet, because that's the other thing. I'm really not big into the horror genre. It's just a matter of preference, so I can't say for sure if it's like where you start, or if it's just something that you like. I think a lot of people around here really like the horror genre, but at the same time, I understand what you're saying, because when you start, the smart thing to do is to take something that that you can pull off. At least that's the mentality that I go through. Smart filmmakers, not everyone does this, but if you're trying to play it smart with budget and resources, you kind of mold a story based on what you can make with what you have, especially when it comes to low budget filmmaking. So horror does seem to be a pretty standard genre for stuff like that. Everyone's got a house, everyone's got, creepy props. And let's face it, it's fun. When you watch some of those, even like some of the movies that like Kurtzman did special effects in, and you talked about some of like the cheesier stuff. Evil Dead, for example.
That's one of my favorite movies.
It's a classic, right?
And it was filmed in a cabin up here in Detroit.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Night of the Living Dead was filmed right outside of Pittsburgh. I mean,
by a mall, and then the mall was like somewhere around this area, I think. or Southern Ohio, maybe.
But that's become kind of a genre in itself, is those campy horror movies, which almost
Sure.
the worse the special effects, the better the movie. Like that's a thing now.
Yeah.
So
I watched Cabin in the Woods tonight, the end of it, just because it's wonderful. It's ridiculous.
And I say that I don't like horror movies, but there are those exceptions, like those really cheesy ones. Evil Dead is a classic example.
Yeah.
And I avoided watching Cabin in the Woods for so long until, admittedly so, I'm going to be a hypocrite here, because I found out Joss Whedon wrote it, and then I was like, oh shit, I got to see this movie.
Yeah.
And it was awesome.
It's ridiculous. Bradley Whitford is so freaking funny in that movie about the merman.
And it is classic Joss Whedon. Like, you can, like, the thing that I love about Joss Whedon, not to go off on a tangent here, but just like take a Joss Whedon like trademark, which is he generally makes like horror or campy, but he combines the two, which is why he was so perfect, I think, for doing the Marvel movie, the Avengers, because he knows how to blend the right amount of seriousness with the right amount of like goofiness, you know?
Yeah, I think Guardians of the Galaxy showcases that better than any of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you 100%. Hands down favorite Marvel movie so far. And I knew nothing about Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, nobody did. Nobody, except the diehard fans that,
Right.
I mean, the comic ran for like a year, maybe year and a half. The comic ran.
Okay. Yeah. And I knew nothing about it. My one buddy who's a huge comic book fan told me, he's like, you just got to go see it. He's like, it was a very entertaining comic book, and like the movie is really good too. And I'm one of those guys, you know. I get teased for being like a comic book purist, but which is something that I don't really think is rare in the genre of kind of things that you guys do either. It's kind of the same, you know.
Which is always amusing to me, because it always comes the worst from the people who always get picked on the worst, or just got shit the worst.
Right.
It's just like, shut up, just knock it off, just enjoy it for what it is, and let everybody do their thing, you know.
Sure. And there's exceptions to every rule. Like Iron Man wasn't exactly a purist, and I wasn't even an Iron Man fan, to be honest, of the comic book, but the movie I really enjoyed.
Yeah, and that's my favorite superhero growing up. So, you know, I could care less about Spider-Man, and people would stab me in the face.
And
for that.
see, I'm one of them, because Spider-Man was my favorite comic book hero.
Yeah,
and
it's all about what you love.
Yeah.
So
exactly. And what was the first question before the?
Are you a top or a bottom?
Oh, yeah.
Are you the big spoon or the little spoon? No, I guess where I was kind of.
I want to see you two stand next to each other.
Depends.
That's what I want.
If it's with the cat, then I have to be the big spoon. But, you know.
I guess lastly, where I was going with that is my buddy that did he did a couple horror films, and then he's done a couple commercials, but he started this really big documentary. It was him and his brother started this documentary on Cobo Hall. I don't know if you ever heard of Cobo. It's a really big convention center up here in Michigan where they did a lot of really, really big concerts. Like a lot of bands had their live concerts filmed there. I know Kiss did. The cover of their album was filmed there in Cobo. Chili Peppers. I mean, there's tons of stuff that goes on in Cobo. If you're from Detroit or anywhere near, you know what Cobo Hall is. Like that's where they host the what is it, the car show. Creeth, you came there. It was last year. We went to the car show up there. But they're tearing it down, and he started a documentary called The Legendary Cobo, and he lined up. He has all this footage of all these interviews with all these great bands on their experiences there, and it's fantastic. Like look it up, Legendary Cobo. And what happened is, because it got bigger than they were, because he was using his own money to fund these horror movies that he did, and he got into bringing in all these interviews, and there was so much stuff going on that he had to go to Kickstarter, because they essentially ran out of money to finish the movie.
Yeah.
So he went over to Kickstarter and started, like, anybody that donates, you know, if you donate so much, you get like a copy of the movie.
Right. Yeah.
And then like the top donators would get like actual seats out of Cobo Hall when they demolished it. And it fell off. Like it didn't get the Kickstarter funding that it needed. Yeah. And I found out the other day that somehow, and I haven't talked to him yet, and I'm going to. He was in my wedding. I mean, he's one of my best friends. That it's coming back. Like there's an actual release date for it now in 2015. Have you run into any filmmakers that have had that where they ran out of funding, they turned to Kickstarter. Maybe it worked, maybe it failed. I mean,
sure, yeah, all the time. The thing about, especially with independent film, that a lot of filmmakers go through is they, well, in one sense, like we were just talking earlier about how like it's okay to wear all these different hats, but at the same time, you want to be able to rely on other people to help you get the job done faster. Filmmaking is always going to be a team effort.
Right.
When you first start out, the reality is also that you will still be wearing more hats than you would be if you were further along down the line. And part of that is like, you're usually not just the director, you're the marketer too. And I've learned through talking to a lot of guests that Kickstarter or Indiegogo or whatever fund me campaign have you is equally, if not more important than the film itself, because that is something that requires so much planning and so much execution, and you could have an amazing idea, and I have seen it. I've worked with some filmmakers in town actually who were trying to gain momentum on a project of theirs, and I read their scripts or whatever, and I was on board to help however I could. And yeah, nothing came out of their crowdsourcing campaign just because they may not have been able to just properly execute the marketing. And especially when you're starting as an independent filmmaker, marketing is everything. Something as simple as I've learned. Actually, one filmmaker told me when you're trying to market and get people to fund your film, like a poster could be all the difference. Like if you can't make like a preview or a short film, that's the other trend right now, especially because we have the internet, is a lot of people can make like a short film, and you see it with a lot of sci-fi movies where they'll make a short film, they'll use it as a marketing ploy for someone to say, I really effing like that, and then they'll back you for
the new
film.
guy who does, and I don't know who's a Doctor Who fan out there, the new Doctor Who intro is all done because of fan art.
Really?
A guy did a fan art thing for Doctor Who for Clara and the new Doctor Who, and I can't remember his name right now.
Yeah.
Damn it, what's his name? Anyway, I love him because he's amazing, but I've been drinking, that's why. He did a fan art thing, and it was gorgeous, and the guys at Doctor Who were watching it, and they're like, yeah. They hired him. He did the whole new intro for this thing just because he made these short little things.
Yeah,
they're doing it all over the place.
That happened in World of Warcraft. You remember the documentary? There was the guy that did he did fan fiction videos. He used in-game footage and his own editing tools, and he made these videos based on the characters and the worlds and everything.
He made the movies.
Yeah, and now he is like lead of cinematic
and the guys
Blizzard.
at World of Warcraft at Blizzard were like, we couldn't wait to see the next one come out. We loved watching it.
They ran into him at BlizzCon one year, and the guy that makes these videos, he's like, why are the creators of Warcraft like geeking out on me making these videos? Like, I should be geeking out on them. Like, this is the game that I love. And, and then they brought him on, and now he's like the head director of cinematic over there.
And that's how you keep things good right there, is you take the people who are in it and the people who love it, who just love it and love it for nothing else but just it, and you let them do it.
Here's a cool story. You guys, one of my favorite sci-fi movies of all time is District 9. Have you guys seen it?
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So District 9 was created by Neil Blomkamp, who originally did a short film. Essentially, it's the same thing. It's just a mini documentary called Alive in Joburg, which you can find on YouTube, by the way. It's out there, and you can watch it. It's about half hour long. But anyway, he made it and got some great response and attracted a lot of attention. One of them being around the same time, Peter Jackson was taking on the possible Halo movie. He saw Alive in Joburg and contacted Neil Blomkamp immediately and said, I'm going to be doing the Halo movie. I want you to direct it. So it was just that movie, right? And anyway, what had ended up happening is they brought him on through all of the natural politics you go through with producing a movie of that volume. Producers backed out of doing the Halo movie. They just couldn't come up on an agreement for the movie. So Peter Jackson had all this money invested in it already, and he said, you know what, screw it, dude. He gave his money to Blomkamp and said, make whatever movie you want. And that's where District 9 came from.
That's
so
amazing.
District 9 was essentially it started as a pitch. They call that, they kind of, like in reality TV, they call that a pitch tape. You essentially film a miniature version of what you're trying to sell. And so District 9 was, or Alive in Joburg was essentially like a pitch tape.
That's awesome.
For District 9.
Yeah, District 9, man. Not to interrupt, but District 9, that's got to be one of my favorite like sci-fi movies.
Yeah.
And it introduced, what's his name, Charlotte Copley, the main guy in District 9. Like, he went on to play the bad guy in Elysium.
That's right.
He's the bad guy in like Maleficent, and he was Murdoch in A-Team.
Yeah.
Like, he's one of my favorite actors that just doesn't get enough screenplay.
And you know what's funny? Oh, sorry.
No, I love that guy. I love District 9. It's awesome that you brought that up.
And you know what's funny about that is I think his original background was as his experience was as a producer, I believe. And after District 9, he had actually said, I believe there's an interview in one of the Comic-Cons where he said he's probably not going to do any more acting after District 9 because that was his first acting gig.
Was it really?
And
in a documentary format where he's sitting there looking at the camera talking like he doesn't know what he's doing, which is a tough thing to do if you're told, all right, look at the camera and act like you can't act now.
And he took it so seriously, and you're absolutely right. He's a phenomenal actor, and he just ran with it. But one of the things that they talk about, I don't know if it was him, I think I read this somewhere, but like he almost had that method acting mentality because they said, like, you know, when he first gets the hand on, he would wear it all day. And he would, like, you'd see him, like, at a table for lunch, like, eating, and he's trying to eat with this hand on. And, like, he just, that's one of the things he talks about is, like, he immersed himself so much in the role.
Yeah.
He never realized before being a producer or whatever it is that he does normally behind the scenes how difficult acting was. And he said that District 9 was probably going to be the only film he acted in. And
wasn't that based off of a true story? I mean, a different telling of a true story and how they had the refugees in Africa, I believe it was.
Well, it's the apartheid.
It's the apartheid.
It's supposed to be what's the word I want?
Yeah, it's a symbolic representation.
Exactly, of what they did to the African Americans for apartheid. Yeah. That's all it is.
And Neil Blomkamp grew up in Johannesburg during the apartheid.
Yeah, he's South African. So, a little bit.
Yeah,
just a bit.
And even I've actually never seen Elysium, but I know that like Elysium has a very political overtone with that as well.
Sure, it does. Yeah, it's the whole idea of there's no middle class, there is the very lowest of the low and the richest of the rich class too. So, I mean, and that has to be why that movie would not work anywhere else other than in 1850s South, the Southern United States, which not really wouldn't work there probably. It wouldn't work anywhere else but South Africa in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
That movie would not work anywhere.
In this post-apocalyptic, like futuristic world that they came out with. So.
Yeah. And that's what I loved about it too, is they took it and they kind of placed it in a very kind of current setting that we couldn't relate to. I mean, not being that like we all know what South Africa is like, but I just mean in present day time. That's like some of my favorite sci-fi is just based on stuff that like we could now wrap our head around.
Yeah.
I
was watching Star Trek: The Next Generation yesterday, and they were using tablets to do things. I'm like, oh, we got those.
I got that.
Isn't that the best when you watch like an old sci-fi movie? Like I think even wasn't Back to the Future based on like 2000 and like something?
Well, didn't the date just come up, or does it come up this year?
It's like 2016, I think, is when he went Back to the Future.
One of the dates just came up though in something not that long ago.
Okay.
It just happened, but anyway, I digress, dude. It's been a good podcast tonight.
It's been a great podcast, Steve. I'm gonna. We've gone. Usually, we try to keep this like 45 minutes to an hour. I mean, we're pushing like an hour and 15 minutes here.
Oh, wow.
I'd love to do a part 2 on this. I mean, I think
Sure.
we flow well. I mean, we got a lot to talk
Yeah.
about here. I mean, there's still a lot in my brain that I'd like to, mesh with yours here. So,
Absolutely.
any shameless plugs you want to throw out? Any of your channels,
Yeah,
your
absolutely.
stuff?
Please,
Go
plug the
ahead
hell out of
and
whatever.
plug it.
Oh yeah, sure. So all of my podcasts can be found on iTunes or sparksradio.com. If you just search for Rusted Film Reports, and you can find that. You can find my my blog, which is my general just Steve Liederbach portfolio mishmash of thoughts at steveopia.com.
Okay.
SteveOpia. Steve Opia, Rusted Film Report, they're both on Facebook. Twitter is at Steve Opia.
Very nice.
If you want to see some of my awesome pictures from the Kurtzman interview, actually, you can follow me on Instagram at Stevo's Ego. And I think that's it.
We'll have it all up on Facebook.com and on Twitter. So
/
check it
Jack-Wagon
out.
Media. Twitter is at Jack-Wagon Media, obviously. Steve, thank you for coming on with us. It was a pleasure meeting
Thanks,
you.
man.
Pleasure
Thanks
having
for
you on the
coming
show.
over.
And
Yeah, I'd love
anytime
to.
you want to do it again, please do. Please do.
Absolutely. No, definitely. It was nice meeting you, man. And I'll see you at work tomorrow.
No, you won't.
No? Okay.
No.
Yeah, no, I know.
I quit.
Second guessing it, too.
No, I'm joking. Anyway, well, hey, it's always nice to see your pretty face.
My face?
Well, yes.
Obviously. All right, guys. Take care. We'll catch you in the next one.
Bye.